The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution.radio. I am your host, Diamond, from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. And joining us today is a good friend of mine and the content creator over at Mountain High Time, Ransom 420, the Freedomist Godwin. Welcome to the show.
And thanks for having me.
Now, Leah did not get any sleep last night, and she woke up very upset to inform me that she was quite frazzled.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a great show today. If we can get to it, we're going to go over 5 topics, maybe 6. I've got some bad news for Ransom at the end of the show based on where he's living, but hopefully we won't get to that. So we're going to talk about some smoke rings from Etna. We're going to talk about an archaeological site they found at Holloman Air Force Base, and how the people who wrote about it really don't know anything about the archaeology of the United States. We'll talk about a freak volcanic eruption of Santorini 1,300 years ago that they once thought was VEI-4 and now might be more similar to the Hunga Tonga boom of 2022, VEI-5 or 6. And we'll talk. And they claim that the sea began to boil. If we get to it, a new paper coming out about the Antarctic Circumpolar current has a lot to do with natural climate cycles. It's the largest ocean current on Earth, and a lot of people are talking about the AMOC shutting down and a mini ice age and all that. Well, this current reveals some information that may show that we're actually going into an ice age and that the climate scam is really a scam. Speaking of the scam, if we have time, new headlines coming out. You might have seen them. 57 companies account for 80% of all the so-called CO2 pollution. And so why aren't they just like banning those companies and the problem solved? What say you, Ransom? You're muted. You're muted.
The double mute. No, I think that's just classic. All of the major polluters of the world are the ones that are always clamoring about how everybody else should stop polluting.
It's your fault. No, it is the fault of 57 companies, in fact, and we'll get to that at the very end of the show. But let's start with an interesting topic, near and dear to Ransom and my hearts, smoke rings. It is, in fact, one of our favorite dispensaries in Pagosa Springs. But more importantly, this phenomenon we're talking about are smoke rings from Etna. I've been reporting on this since I started the channel. You've seen these before, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
So typically, they only happen in a single ring. And that's because Etna's main caldera that these come from is perfectly circular, which is what you try to do with your mouth when you make a smoke ring. You make it like a ooh. And so the caldera is perfectly circular, and it just so happens that Etna often just burps. So it just goes like, and it pushes up some steam, and this is what you get here. This actually isn't smoke, unfortunately. It's volcanic gas and steam, and it's just a cloud. As you can see the other clouds in the area there.
Yes.
So these mysterious rings that rise above Etna are not smoke. They are steam and volcanic gas, but they're fantastic. And we even have a video. So this is captured in the last 2 days. And so what Etna started to do, oh, we don't want that, is to burp a lot. And look at that. See the string of rings there?
Oh, that's definitely aliens.
Yeah. Look at that. It's like boom, 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 boom.
It's getting high up there in the sky.
Hitting good. Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. And you guys out in Radio Land can't see any of this. We're torturing you because this is going to be replayed with the video tonight on Magnetic Reversal News at 8 p.m. on YouTube. So make sure to mark your calendar and go over and subscribe there. Also, subscribe over at Ransom's channel. Where's that at, Ransom?
Mountain High Time, otherwise known as 420 TV.
So Mountain High Time on YouTube. The link will be below. All right, let's move on to this archaeological site that they found near your house at Holloman Air Force Base. And this is in New Mexico, in Alamogordo. They uncovered a campsite that they've dated back to 8,200 years ago. And it says here, this is what I find funny, possibly belonging to the first settlers of New Mexico, according to a news release sent out by the airbase.
Yeah, they're only about 20,000 years off, aren't they?
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about this site is it's pretty deep. It's 6 feet deep and dates to 8,200 years. Now, there are some sites nearby that just a foot or two down, or even on the surface, they've discovered footprints, which a little less than 6 months ago, they reconfirmed date back between 20 and 23,000 years ago. So I guess they didn't get the memo.
Right. And, I find funny about these is usually the numbers go down. So like when I first read about this 5 years ago or so, they were trying to say 30 and then they went down to 27, 25, and now they're kind of agreeing 20 to 23K.
Yeah, well, I like those numbers too. I like those numbers. Those are pretty significant. That would make it pre-Solutrean, the Solutrean period, which is, I think that these people are probably the Solutrean culture and also then will transform into the Clovis culture. Right. It's simply an evolution of technology amongst the people of North America. It's not like different people get beamed in and others get beamed out.
Right. And I've been doing a lot of genetic studying of my own. And it seems that, almost all of the peoples of the world, despite them trying to make them different, come out of the same sources in Eurasia. Even Native Americans, a lot of the haptypes just crossed over. And these are the people that had those technologies. So they obviously would have brought the technologies with them. And even if the technology passed from one group to another, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same people, but they did have contact. And as far as that, they kept trading in technology.
Yeah, there's migrations everywhere. So these technologies are being shared between different haplogroups. And I concur about the Native Americans probably came from a region in Siberia and across that the region of Alaska there on the Bering Strait or the Bering Bridge, the ice-free corridor, whatever, especially when sea levels were lower. So that would have been around 18,000 years ago. There's going to be tons of migration up on that Pacific rim there, simply because the Pacific is so massive. And if it's an ice age, on the coast is the only place that's going to be warm because of all that heat in the ocean. There's going to be a strip on the ocean there that's going to be flourishing with animals and right. Fish and seals. And it's probably so simple to eat lunch. You just need a spear and you start stabbing things.
Right. And we know that there's 30,000-year-old civilization all the way down into South America. So obviously these numbers that they have are just what they found. And doesn't really give a whole picture. I mean, because they keep digging up new stuff. You got the sloth pendants and stuff like that. And recent genetic studies say the Inca had lots of pre-Columbian European DNA admixture.
Interesting. Did they say where that's from?
No, they're just, I'll send you the papers. And then that kind of corresponds to, the dog migration. They have dogs all the way in Tierra del Fuego that are Viking dogs.
Oh, wow. So yeah, the Vikings did get around and they were definitely traveling along the coastlines. They were experts at the sea. And so there is really no limit to how far and wide they traveled. You know what I mean? But the evidence is what's lacking, but I'm sure they were everywhere.
And even if they didn't get to those places, they traded with people who did go to those places.
Right. It's like whisper down the lane. I gave you a dog in North America. It ends up in South America.
Right.
All right. That's pretty cool. Did we beat this with a dead horse? Anything else about well, actually, I remember a paper I talked about that there was a discovery in California where there were hominids 120 or 130,000 years ago. There was evidence for. Do you remember that?
In America?
Yeah, in California, maybe La Brea.
Oh yeah, like with the tar pits, chisel marks, and things like that.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, let's talk about when the sea began to boil. Now, this freak volcanic eruption of Santorini 1,300 years ago indicates, and this is bad news for those listening, that these huge blasts can occur at any time, even during a time of quiet. And we brought this up on the uptick in seismic activity over there at in Italy at Campi Flegrei. You've been covering that, haven't you?
No.
So the last 3 years, there's been an uptick in seismic swarms at Campi Flegrei, which is quote unquote a super volcanic complex. Now, the way these super volcanoes are determined is typically VEI 8 or greater. VEI 7 can be put into it. It's a sliding scale. But all of these caldera forming volcanoes have so much magma that when they erupt, I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of cubic kilometers worth, that a huge void in the earth forms and that the surface of the crust then falls down into the hole, forming what we call a caldera. So these caldera formers are big volcanoes. They're not well understood, but it's becoming very clear that there may not be a lot of warning before they go boom.
Right. Was there any warning with the Tunga? Nobody knew until it just happened, right?
It went boom. Well, that was a catastrophic event because it's ultra Surtsian. So it's a very rare event. And that same type of eruption can happen here. And the reason is what occurred there at Hunga is that there's a volcano that's a little bit under the ocean, but some of it's sticking out of the ocean. And if the magma chamber, if a crack is occurring, let's say magma's pushing into the chamber and this crack occurs on the ocean floor and there's pressure, bad news. The ocean pushes into the magma chamber. This violent reaction with the magma occurs and it's boom time.
Right. When you sent me this article, I went looking for this explosion in 726, and there's really not much information about it. They barely even knew about it, because there wasn't really much evidence. But then on the new islands that are in the caldera, there's a bunch of evidence, right?
Yeah, we'll break all that down in the next 15 minutes or so. I've got huge amounts of information. The paper came out on March 25th, just a few weeks ago, hazardous explosive eruptions of a recharging multi-cyclic island arc caldera. So we'll leave you links to the paper below. But first, let's talk about Santorini. The biggest eruption we know about Santorini is pretty famous, and Leah and I have done podcasts on it. It's known as the Minoan eruption, and it occurred about 3,600 years ago. In 1600 BCE. And many people think it was VEI 7, some say VEI 6, but nonetheless, it was a huge eruption. And there are archaeological sites here that are buried under, how many feet of ash was it?
I saw a thing that said 400 feet.
Yeah, so 400 feet of ash, and there was an advanced city here. Back then they called this is in the Aegean Sea near Greece or in Greece, and an island offshore the main portion of Greece there. And this was once called Thera. So this is the Thera Ultraplinian eruption, 1600 BC. And here we're looking at the remnants. And this is even after the super explosion back in 700 here. And if we pan out, you can see it's in the middle, very middle here of what appears to be maybe even a bigger caldera. Look at the size of that.
Right. Isn't this where the African plate is pushing up against Europe as well? So it's never going to stop there at any time in the near future.
No. So what you get is major landslides here on this boundary that pour out into the abyssal plain, and then major tsunamis rushing up on these islands, killing everyone. And then if you live long enough, right here where your city is, the whole island blows up And then within like a few hours, you're under 700 foot of ash.
Wow.
What's weird about this is there's no people like Pompeii frozen in time. And that is because, why do you think?
Because they had pre-warning of smoke and bubbles and things like that out into the ocean,
Yeah, I
allegedly.
guess, yeah, probably many of the people escaped, or else we would see lots of dead people in fear. But this was a huge eruption. But more importantly, let's talk about what we know about the eruption. Here we can see on this list the 1610 BCE plus or minus 14 confirmed, and they say VEI 7 question mark. You see that?
Yeah.
And then here's the 726 plus or minus 45 days. Happened on July 15th, by the way. And it says VEI 4 question mark. So that they were off there.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to wonder because, I was doing a lot of reading. So evidently, I guess the one in 1300, there was a previously formed giant island out there in the caldera that probably had an entire city on it. And that city just, well, it's gone. And now there's new islands. So you can imagine that if that anything like any of these happened again, the entire Mediterranean would be done. And Europe would be at a standstill for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, the good news is that since that eruption 1,300 years ago, it's only gone off at VEI 3. But here's another question mark in 1650. But the question is, I mean, there are so many places on Earth to live, and you and I live in like an area where very few people live. If I drive to your house, which takes about 6 hours, I'm not going to pass many people. Why do people continue to move back to these places that completely get obliterated?
Oh, because all of the fishing and the fertile grounds to farm on, they go back because it's a plush environment until it gets destroyed.
Bad planning.
It did what we were talking about there, the pre-knowledge. This tells me that the people that live there were experiencing stuff for a long time, enough to know that that was a warning sign to leave. So they must have had experienced multiple eruptions even before that.
And perhaps they even discovered some of the archaeology of the destroyed cities
Right.
from the 1650 eruption. And they put 2 and 2 together and they were like, huh. And so if your island starts smoking and booming and earthquakes, are you just going to sit there and make tea? Probably not. You'll say, let's take a vacation to Uncle Jimmy's down the coast.
Right. It's time to go on vacation.
And then you watch from a distance as it all gets destroyed. So I wonder where these people went.
You would have seen all of this from other areas like Egypt and all of the other places in ancient times that had civilization. They all would have had a view of this from their vantage points in the Mediterranean.
Yes, and guess what? It was during a dark age. So what I have up here is the GISP 2. And if we go back to 700 CE here, we're at the bottom of this dark age. And there's another blip of cold down here before the medieval warm that may have been a result of this Santorini explosion. So it could have helped it drop another 1/4 of a degree. And so we're in a dark age here. So everyone in the Mediterranean is suffering. The skies would have probably gone dark or cloudy, and there would have been long periods of rain. And if you read the article, they thought it was only a VEI 4 because there was very little evidence of ash. Well, if it's a dark, cloudy age for decades and it's pouring rain and miserable, most of the ash is going to be washed away naturally. So I think that's why they didn't find all the evidence until recently.
Right, because it all eroded back into the ocean.
Yeah, so it's just missing because it was a wet period. These dark ages are wet periods. They're periods when there's plague and other horrible diseases, obviously. You're sitting around in moist stuff for long periods of time. You're going to get mold and other kind of crap happening. It's just miserable until it warms up And these green strips are all times of prosperous empires on Earth. You got the Minoans in this little strip, lasts not that long, 300 to 400 years, and then it all goes away. And so here's our modern warm period, and we got about 300 years of what do you think is going to happen? What happens next based on this graph?
We go down in a trough.
Yes, indeed. We're probably about to drop off.
And I was going to ask you, does that necessarily indicate increased volcanic activity along with the cycle?
Well, that brings in other layers and multidisciplinary sciences in here. So, you know about the correlation of grand solar minimums and increased volcanic activity.
Yes.
So the idea here is at these bottoms, these cold periods, it's times when the sun is shutting off, grand minimas, and at some point, due to increased cosmic rays and energy from space, a VEI-7, one of these caldera-forming volcanoes, goes boom. And then it makes it even worse. So it's already cold, the sun's already shutting down, then it gets a little colder, and it really ends the empire, so to speak. Because all these initial drop downs in these grand minimas end the empire. So will transhumanism and our technology make it past the next drop down? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. They might have to be dipping into some of that Neanderthal archaic DNA to let us survive.
What do you mean?
I mean that they were suited to the cold. That's what they say. All of their little traits were adaptations to the cold. But they obviously lived through a bunch of warm periods as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, what took them out was the Lechamp magnetic excursion, which we don't have any articles to talk about. But so bad things like getting cold ends empires. But if you add a magnetic excursion to the mix, that becomes an extinction event.
Right. And also Neanderthal, I've read several papers that say they had a real problem with the UV light. And actually, from my own studies, they carried a big multiple array of skin tones and genes. So some of them would have been really fair with freckles, red hair that wouldn't have did too well. And then like myself, I tested positive for the dark skin gene. So some of the Neanderthal would have did all right, and that might explain why there was mixing events.
Yes, and not only were Neanderthals went extinct 41,500 years ago, but other megafauna also didn't fare well. And there's a great paper that came out 3 years ago that explains in great detail that what's occurring is the weakening magnetosphere approaches almost zero. It goes down to 10%, and that the amount of UVB and UVC that is raining down on Earth is very bad for, specifically those biological entities predisposed to be affected by UV.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, possibly if you did adapt to the cold, which would have mean your skin would have got lighter to absorb more vitamin D, some of those people that adapted more to the cold would have been maybe adversely affected if the magnetic field collapsed on them, because their mutations would have worked backwards on them and they would have had ill effects instead of beneficial effects.
Yeah, very interesting. So the question is, if we've been around, let's say Homo sapiens sapien has been around for, let's just go 1 million years. We've been through many of these magnetic excursions, these cold periods, these periods of increased cosmic rays. Why are there still pale white people?
Because because they figured out how to use technology, I would say. I mean, you have all of those different examples of ancient civilizations spreading red ochre all over their skin. They must have had a reason to do that. And I think it's because they discovered they didn't get fried if they were the particular people that didn't have genes to deal with the sun.
Right. And then you can add on the whole myth of the caveman and the underground cities at Derinkuyu, stone structures that were built, thousands of years ago that no one knows why. They built these dolems. Well, it's probably hailing 1-foot hail, or rocks are falling from the sky, or
Right.
something is bad happening from the sky.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like they were blocking out enemies. I
No.
mean, because enemies would have just found their holes for ventilation and burned them out. So this was something, probably a natural phenomenon they were hiding from, because of they didn't take steps to protect themselves against people. It was protection against the sky.
Yeah, literally God or the boogeyman, or I wonder what they thought of it back then. They just knew it was bad, kills people.
Yeah. Some grandkid got spanked. I told you not to play with that. The gods would be mad.
All right, so we've got
Kidding.
lots of evidence here that climate is cyclic, right? It's not
Yes.
controlled by CO2 or man. It's not your fault. There is something driving this, and it rapidly gets warm, and then it rapidly gets cold, and people have good times and bad times, and the cycle is very periodic. There is a major period every 1,000 years, and we're in the next one, and this one is going to be over soon. You're supposed to be scared now.
Oh, sorry.
All right, let's move on to the Antarctic circumpolar current. Did you take a look at this article?
Yes, I didn't really make much sense of it, so I started reading. It basically says they don't know.
Yeah, and they tried to use this to like prove climate change and that we're going to do bad things. The humans are doing bad things to the earth.
Right.
But I, in fact, think this might have backfired a little bit. So what they do is they have this high resolution data set, and let me get you the paper here,
Okay.
of the Atlantic circumpolar current. And here's the paper. It is 5 million years of Antarctic circumpolar current, strength, and variability. It says the Antarctic circumpolar current, or the ACC, represents the world's largest ocean current system and affects global ocean circulation, climate, and the Antarctic ice sheet stability. That's a lot in one sentence there.
Right.
Now, if you didn't know, the Antarctic has probably been frozen continuously for, at minimum, 13 million years. So no time in the last 13 million years has it been ice-free. And the ice on Antarctica is thick. There is a lot of ice on Antarctica. Additionally, the ice sheets on Antarctica are massive. So in the winter, which is our summer, we've got hundreds of thousands of square miles of ice. And then in the summer, almost all of those ice sheets completely melt back to land. Most people don't know that. Did you know that?
Yes, actually, I was just looking at stuff, and here I would like you to kind of explain this. So this is the information that people would get if they went and looked for themselves. So I Googled it, Antarctic sea ice growth, and then one of the first entries is that they've lost 74 trillion tons of water in 25 years. But then when you scroll down a little bit, there's another article that says that from the start of satellite observation in 1979, the ice has increased about 1% per decade. So
Exactly.
even though they're saying it's all melting off, they fail to mention that every year it gains ice when it comes back.
Exactly. It's a word salad to confuse you. It's misinformation completely.
Right.
Because
Yeah, so
most people aren't going to check the homework. They're not going to go and do any research. They're just going to read the headline, and that's all they'll remember.
and another thing that bothers me about that is the date, right? They're telling you that they know all of this information due to observing something for 60 years.
Exactly. And the all-time Antarctic ice high is just a few years ago. I think it was 2013 or 14.
Right.
All right. So now that we've got that out of the water, most scientists are frauds, and they've got to prove it's our fault and it relates to climate change, or else they wouldn't be funded. It's that simple.
Right. There's no money without the fear.
So obviously the largest ocean current on Earth is going to have huge impacts on the local climate in the southern pole or the southern hemisphere. And what they have here in this picture, which you can see tonight on Magnetic Reversal News, is a simulated ocean velocity at 100 meters depth through time. And you can see how like the main flow is moving. It's variable, right?
Right.
Because nothing is linear. Everything shifts. Now, what's interesting here is you've seen this top graph. This is the Epica data, the ice core data. Ice age cycles every 100,000 years. And what they've got laid underneath here is this Antarctic circumpolar current here. So you see that, Ransom?
Yes.
Here's where it gets interesting. Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Oh, I was going to say it's matching up almost perfectly there.
Yeah. So what you get is these ice age cycles. We come out of the glacial maximum rapidly. Temperature rises like 20 C on Earth. We're in an interglacial like we are today. And then we drop back down into that glacial cycle for 100,000 years into glacial maximum. That's happened again and again. And while that happens, the strength of this current, the Antarctic circumpolar current, increases when it's warm on Earth and decreases when we go back into ice age. That's all this is showing. But if you look at where we are today, what do you see the blue line doing?
Drop off.
Okay. And here, 100,000 years ago, when the blue line dropped off, we went into an ice age for 100,000 years. Here, 2 cycles ago, when the blue line dropped off, we went into an ice age for 100,000 years. And here, 300,000 years ago, when the blue line dropped off, what happened on Earth, Ransom?
It got cold again?
So what they're claiming, this is showing that the current is getting stronger, when actually, what is the graph showing here?
That it decreases with the cycle.
It's showing also that the Atlantic circumpolar current is also decreasing, the opposite of what they're saying in the paper.
Right.
It's so bizarre.
And so that's a direct correlation, meaning that if you were a human worried about global warming, you might not even be the same species of human in 80,000 years when it starts to warm up.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's going to be lots of magnetic excursions in the interim.
Right.
Yeah, so interesting.
And I was going to ask, that's a big graph. So when we're looking at these teeny tiny little peaks and troughs, the teeny tiny ones, that's major effects for civilization for us. Even those little bitty ones. So like,
so that would be like in here. See this little ups and downs right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the temperature fluctuations we were showing on the Holocene graph. But look at these. These are beyond, they are beyond empire ending. They are world shattering.
Right.
And the last time we jumped up here, this is the Younger Dryas event. This is the 12-9 event. There's the Younger Dryas cooling, and then the recovery. During this event, 60% of all megafauna in North America extinct. 40% of megafauna worldwide extinct. Whole lineages of humans gone.
So you could add, if you had the amount of data, obviously we don't, but if you had a graph showing animal population and human populations, they would follow the same course as this.
I would think so, because all populations, as the Earth gets colder and the ice age ensues, it gets drier and dustier. Right down here, it probably doesn't rain almost anywhere on Earth. So you have to be near the edge of the glacial margin just to get fresh water. That's the only place where it's melting that there's fresh water, because it's not raining. It's a weird time. Like now, it rains everywhere on Earth.
Yeah.
But when you get down here to the glacial max, just like if we were around 20,000 years ago, it would have been dusty.
Do you think that's where some of the myths of it not raining before the Great Flood and stuff like that, where they have this idea of that there was just a mist and water came from the ground, but it didn't rain?
It could be the Purple Dawn too, before the Younger Dryas. Yeah, pre-Diluvian. Very dry, no rain, different times. Huge animals trying to eat you all day. So the good news is that the last event eliminated lots of stuff that wanted to eat us. Can you imagine if all the megafauna were around and if we took a hike in the woods, saber-tooth would come out and eat us?
Yeah, we're too lazy for that. We would go extinct at this point.
Or we would have some really serious weapons or force fields or something.
Well, it would be process of natural selection because, me and you would probably run, get a stick and a rock while all of the obese people were left to be dinner. Sorry, but that would just happen.
Right. So there would be a smaller population of extremely fit and resourceful people.
That's why they had all those old statues of those guys cut up back in the ancient world, because, nothing like us today.
Yeah, but that is by design. Because I think the elites are preparing for a huge shift, and many people feel it, but many people don't know what it is. But it's happening. It's rolling out while they are zombies, and they just continue to go on with their life.
Right. I was wondering when they were going to end the overpopulation myth now that they've admitted that we are at the plateau at 8 billion and that it's going to reduce over the next 50 and 100 years dramatically, having nothing to do with disasters, just the natural evolution of elderly people and new births and infertility and all that. So you imagine throwing one of these little curves at human beings at the same time.
Exactly. And now we've got medically assisted suicide and castration protocols, and we're chopping off the genitals and puberty blockers in youths. It's literally a youth. This is crazy. It is a population reduction in plain sight. And it's like people don't get it.
Maybe this is actually by the elite. They're actually looking out for us and they're helping reduce the population so there won't be so much fighting, when it's down to the nitty gritty there. They're helping us. It's for our own benefit.
Well, let's discuss that. Are they helping us? 57 companies drive the quote unquote global climate crisis. So the quest to curb emissions has been around for almost a decade. It's rapidly increasing, right? We've got carbon credits. They're creating these factories that suck carbon dioxide out of the air, literally, which would eventually lead to the mass extinction of all life on Earth if we just reduce it a tiny little bit. They don't tell you that in any of these articles.
No, I came across that on my own, realizing that they were saying this 419 or 420 parts per million was, so horrible. And then I'm looking and they're saying like around 200, 160, everything starts dying off.
Yeah, below 170 everything would die. Everything on Earth. Not just people, everything on Earth.
Right. And right now, they don't tell you this either, that just the amount of trees in the U.S. Sequesters more CO2 than we put out.
Exactly. And the oceans control 99% of the CO2 on our planet. Humans account for maybe 1%. Some go as high as 4% of total CO2 content, which, by the way, in our atmosphere is 0.07% of the total. So we're talking literally about nothing. All this panic for nothing.
Well, not to be, I'm kind of, simple-minded. So when I hear let's get rid of CO2 and CO2 is plant food and, plants give us food, it's us we're reducing. That's obviously what it is.
Well, I can't blow this picture up. That's weird. I've never had a picture I can't blow up. Oh, there we go. Right. So if 57 companies emit 80% of all the human CO2, why are they taxing us? Why are we paying higher fuel prices for this green agenda? Why not just go to those 57 companies and tell them all they have to be carbon neutral? The whole problem is fixed.
I would bet that these 57 companies, or at least the majority of them, are where these ideas of taxing the people come from.
Exactly. And on top of that, 30%, 31% of those companies are in China. And they're not reducing anything. They're building coal-fired power plants every 2 weeks.
Yeah, that was actually my next question to you, and you answered it. So yeah, like a third or more. So in the next 20 years, there'll be half.
Yes, that'd be half of all global emissions from China. Uh, and so if you critically think about what's been going on the last decade, Davos, all these meetings with the elites, all these, the Paris Accord, and all these protocols on climate, and it doesn't matter what you do or say, none of this is ever going to change. So what it is just, it's a fantasy. It is a ruse in plain sight. It's a narrative that they're going to keep playing this playbook. It'll never end. It won't even matter if we remove all the CO2. It's going to continue because it's still our fault. It's so weird. How do you see that? Do you see an end in sight?
No, and I think all of this is, all along the lines of for a long time they couldn't figure out how to just tax you for existing. So now we have a breathing tax, so to speak.
Yeah.
Everything you do in a carbon limit.
It's insane. The tax scam, how we pay taxes on our paycheck, then we pay taxes on everything we buy. Then at the end of the year, we have to pay taxes on all the taxes we've already paid taxes on.
Right, and I could tell something's up with that, or they wouldn't be pushing all of these universal basic income ideas. Because obviously, if you get a major portion of the population on universal basic income, they're not paying carbon taxes, obviously. So how does that work out in the end? That's
Right.
just another sign that they plan on it collapsing.
Yeah, so they're taxing us to death where we can't afford everything, but they want to give us all free money. That's Oppositeville.
Right.
Oh, man. All right, let's dive into this. This map, the average life expectancy in America has got people going insane because a lot of people live where their expectancy is 20 years less, and that's the red areas for those that can't see.
Whoa.
And the dark blue areas, beautiful, right there, Archuleta County in dark blue.
Right.
So what do you think is going on with this map, and what do you think it represents?
Most of that is diet right off the bat. I can see that that's diet. You have the trendy areas that are getting organic foods. They're paying high dollar, like you could look at California, New York. STDs, I guarantee you, if you flopped over a map of STDs, that's also on there. And just lifestyle. I mean, think about the whole lifestyle. If you've been to the South, you'll know what I mean. They are eating up traditional foods that at one time were relatively healthy, but now they're adding all of the frying in these artificial oils and seed oils and stuff. So this is like a cancer pocket. And another thing you notice is clean air, except for maybe California and New York there. But if you live in the South, I would say that this is mostly related to diet.
I agree. In fact, if you look at an obesity map, it is this entire red area where that is, happening. Just
And
like, yeah.
I was going to say, unfortunately, those red dots in New Mexico and Arizona are the Native American communities.
And I was also thinking they also may correspond to radioactive areas.
Yeah, possibly, except for Otero County down there is in the white. And
is that this right here?
Yep. And that would be where the atomic bomb was. But you could look up to Nevada over there.
Yeah. Yeah. Something going on there where Area 51 is, right?
Yeah, Nevada. They kind of radioactive.
Now, what's interesting in these rural counties down here in the dark blue, the people here, which includes me in Colorado, our diet consists of meat. The majority of people are eating meat, red meat every day.
Right.
Everything against the current food pyramid. And the people in the red areas are following the current food pyramid and getting all of their calories from carbohydrates and all the crap that the industry is pushing on them.
Yeah, it also looks like altitude might play a part as far as clean air goes there. I see Colorado and Washington, all that whole stretch of the Rocky Mountains, and then out there on the Sierra Nevadas as well.
Yeah, they say that there's a connection between altitude and life expectancy increasing. And maybe that's because it's a little harder to live out here. You got to do a little bit more work. So you're constantly have to be moving even when you get old, getting firewood or shoveling or whatever you're doing. Like my 80-year-old, 83-year-old friend is on the roof shoveling ice every winter. It's
Right.
insane.
Well, you think about it, not only that, and maybe altitude, what you said there, it's hard to live in those areas. So those people are also the farmer types, the people that try to eat good, they're exercising. And then you compare that with the South there. No offense to the South, but if you've been there, everybody's eating a lot of fried foods. It's a lot of lethargic activity, air conditioners on all the time because they got swamp butt 24 hours a day down there. So it's a lot of inactivity and bad eating.
Plus, the alligators are eating people too. Also, you got severe weather down here, tornadoes killing people, right?
Yeah.
This is like Tornado Alley. There's a lot of reasons not to live in the red zones, except for living older.
I also saw an article the other day that, and if you see that very dark red area that goes through Arkansas, Louisiana, that's the Mississippi River. And that's where they're dumping out all of the grossest pollutants, fertilizers and stuff. And then even all the way down by New Orleans, they say there's an 82-mile stretch of super cancer region of all the carcinogens and stuff that dumps out right there at the end of it.
Right. So you got people, this is rural. A lot of people have well water here. It's all toxic. Actually, the most toxic area as far as the ground and soil is the far eastern Texas due to all the oil and gas and pipelines that burst there. Also very hot and red, but right on the Mississippi is maroon. People are eating fish out of this river. It's not recommended. So they're getting heavy metals, lead, cadmium, and then those toxins that are in that water are aerosolized with winds and things splashing or at like low head dams. And then people are breathing carcinogenic, water vapors. It's just bad news. And where are the cancer rates that you know about spiking?
It was the last 82 miles of the Mississippi River right down in Louisiana. So right around New Orleans area. But if you mentioned that, if you look over there by Texas, New Mexico border, you see that real red area. That's where they're doing all the fracking. East New Mexico and West Texas right there. Right. Literally, that's where you see that earthquake go off all the time for no reason.
Exactly. That's deep well injection where they're pumping the toxic waste into the ground.
And guess what else is out there? Farms, lots of farms. They're growing stuff in between the fracking zones. You can look at it on Google. It's disgusting.
Oh my God. Yeah. So take a look at Oklahoma. Also, this huge red zone here, there are millions of frack wells in this portion of the state. The largest frack quakes have occurred in this portion of the state. And so, again, there's a direct correlation between this fracking and life expectancy.
I wonder what that red dot up there in the Dakotas is about.
Yeah, we should look into that. That is some serious hotspots.
Reservation, I bet. I bet money.
And so that would be alcohol related. People ending their life early in terrible ways.
Well, and the GMO diet, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. All right. So let's sum it up. We've got about 8 minutes left here. Let's bring in some hope to the world. We've talked about a little bit of gloom and doom. We showed you where you're going to die early. How can people, let's say, turn this around and, let's get your thoughts. I never have time to watch your show at David Dubine. And so I'm sure you're talking about this kind of stuff all the time. What are your thoughts? What's going to happen between now and the election?
I imagine that they'll intensify all the regional wars that they got going on. They'll push fear to the max about random diseases going around like they're doing with the bird flu right now. They're just going to push fear. They're going to try to keep everybody completely distracted with meaningless stuff so that they're not dealing with the problem, which is this map that we're looking at right here, is all the ways that you're being toxified and killed and reduced in life, not to mention the next generations that are being blocked. I talk a lot about that because I feel like Nostradamus, right at the time that they admit technologically we could mass reproduce human-like entities in the lab and produce them is the same time that all the people are being reduced everywhere. And it's odd to me that they're pushing everyone north. All these NGOs are pushing everybody and further concentrating them in these cities, which all aligns with the Agenda 2030 to remove everyone out of occupied areas of wilderness, which they have millions of rewilding programs going on to move you out of areas of rural areas, and even introducing Pleistocene animal programs in Europe and Americas. Weird.
Yeah, I can't wait till the woolly mammoth is back in the Rocky Mountains.
Well, it's weird. Why would they be planning for Pleistocene animals if the world's burning up and it's going to go the other direction?
Well, if there's no people, you need to get those herd animals out on the plains to allow the cycle to continue, to push in the poop in the ground and fertilize the earth and keep it moving. That was the way it used to be.
Right.
Now,
but
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was going to say, but obviously with all of these plans that they have, there's one missing ingredient, and that's a free human.
Yeah, that's certainly not going to be happening. What I find interesting about this map, take a look in Iowa. This is where they spray all the chemicals on all the corn, and yet everyone has very long life expectancy. And the best state to live in is Minnesota to live long. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
You think what's going on there? Is it the cheese?
It might be. I mean, most of the people there probably are lactose tolerant, but not only that, they live inside for most of the year in climate controlled areas. It's not like they're living outside in the frozen tundra there.
And they eat a lot of fish in Minnesota. A lot of ice fishing. So it is found there's a high correlation between living to 90 and fish oil. So if you do not take a fish oil supplement, you guys got to be out there getting a fish oil supplement. They're cheap, easy to get. And I think it's a really good prep tool to have in your closet to keep healthy.
I almost would bet also that if you overlaid a map of the amount of people that take medication intravenously, if you know what I mean, in the recent years, that might also correlate. And this map might be changing in the next few years to show that.
No, can you tell me what you mean by that?
I mean, pharmaceutical medicines that people may or may not have taken intravenously in the past couple of years.
Okay.
Those areas are also the most areas where they have free medical programs where you can get that free, and they push you monthly to don't forget to get all your medications from them.
Exactly. Now, are you prepared if there were to be an EMP coming off of the sun or an EMP from Russia or China that shut the grid down for a year? Are you prepared there at your crib to make it through there? What would your plan be if that were to occur? You know, in a day or two, you realize it's not going to come back on. What do you do?
After 5 days, I'm getting out of anywhere where there's a metropolitan area, which there's like 20 million people only an hour south of me. So I know within about a week. Well, actually, truth be told, the power goes out here quite often. And the difference between criminal activity and not criminal activity is whether or not the power outage lasts longer than an hour. So people are talking about weeks and months. And no. Within 2 days, people are out robbing, stealing, and doing bad things. Just within a couple of days. I've been in several places where there was no power for like an ice storm in Arkansas. Within the second night, people were robbing and stealing all over the place. So I wouldn't be here. Once the lights go out, I'm out. There's no reason to stay here. It's a useless piece of land. There's nothing here but needy people. So you would want to leave. I'm sorry. I'm fine. I've been homeless. I know how to live outside. I'm fine with that. I have plenty of personal Gore-Tex, personal tents to sleep outside. I mean, you've seen me do it. I don't need a tent. I got it for the whole family. We'll sleep right on the ground outside.
So what do you pack up everything that you need into the vehicle and then go?
Yeah.
Everything you're taking, all your food, all your supplies, everything gets packed in. And then where you are, you would just travel north because that's into the middle of nothing.
Right. And we're only going to take what you can carry also. Even though you're hauling it in a car, that car's not going to, be worth much once you run out of gas.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can't carry it.
That's important. Now, also have some backup gas cans that you can throw in that time so you can get a little further.
Like for me personally, I picked a car that one tank will get me halfway across the United States. So in my car, I can fill up a tank and I can go within a 450-mile range without having to worry about it, which means that I can haul another tank of gas, which gets me 1,000 miles at least.
So you can make it here easy.
Oh yeah, one tank of gas, no problem. I still get a quarter tank.
All right. Well, I recommend you come straight here.
Right? I would do
We're in
that.
this dark blue county right there.
I know. I was looking at that. You guys, that's where it's at, and I'm down here surrounded by. It says that it's good there, but I don't know. We just got ranked the most dangerous state in the United States.
Oh,
New
wow.
Mexico, yay! Communist state of New Mexico.
Thanks for joining us, Ransom. Check out the replay, guys, on Magnetic Universal News tonight. That's a boom.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.